Hey everyone, so today I read Matthew 17 and Mark 9 it goes back to back with what we read yesterday, and we see even in the last section of Matthew 16 that Jesus is talking about following him and taking up your cross and choosing to deny yourself, right? Not in that order, but he goes and talks about how the Son of Man, who we learn is he's God himself, essentially. We see this figure in Daniel chapter 7 come up, and it says that he would, the hosts would be serving before him, all the angels, and that he would be coming in the glory of the Father. And so Jesus takes this and says, the Son of Man, me, Jesus, is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. This is Judgment Day that he's talking about. And he says, truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And so the thing about the Bible as it was originally written is that there were no chapter verse distinctions, right? And so this chapter 16 and chapter 17 would have been one unified whole, right? And so there might have been a paragraph break, but even that is unlikely because of how Greek was written versus English. And so literally the next sentence, it says, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And so he says, okay, so some of you are going to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And then, like, less than a week later, 3 of his disciples who are standing there of the 12 go with him and see this amazing spectacle, right? And so there's so much going on here that is like all just based upon the Old Testament. It's like you put all the Old Testament pictures in a blender and just, poured it out here. So first off, coming up to a high mountain, that's a big deal in just Jewish thought and really all the cosmologies of ancient Near Eastern countries, is that if you have a high mountain, it's very holy because it's closer to heaven, right? And so your goal is to get to the highest place. That's why they built the Tower of Babel, a man-made structure to try and reach in and break into heaven. And so these guys, they are on this high mountain with Jesus, right? And so we think of, Genesis 2, that Adam and Eve, the first people, are birthed on a high mountain and called to spread out and to fill all the earth with the knowledge and the glory of the Lord and in his order and creation and everything. And so, yeah, tons of stuff. Psalm 46, Exodus 20, all kinds of different places where we see these high mountains coming up, and a lot of bad high mountain stuff where it says that, like, the people of Israel, they built shrines to, all these different evil little gods, little g gods, on all the high hills and mountains of Israel and stuff like that. So, yeah, you can look at that on your own time. But verse 2, it says that he was transfigured. Jesus was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And so his face shining like the sun, that's used later in Revelation, but it doesn't occur, as far as I know, in the Old Testament. But even just thinking of, your face is prosopon in Greek, it was always an indication of God's favor, his seeing you and exemplifying his favor, his glory, his love upon you. And so, that's why it says, like, may your face shine upon you in the priestly blessing of Aaron in number 6. And so when it says that his face shone like the sun, it's radiating the glory of the Lord. And it made me think of Isaiah 6:3, where the angels are saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory, right? And so Jesus is exemplifying this, and he's doing exactly what he said, which is that they would see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And it says that his clothes shone like white, white as light. And so if we go to Daniel 7, the verse before, I think I read it yesterday, but Daniel 7 verse 9, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days, God himself, the Father, took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair on his head was white as wool. And we see later in Revelation that Jesus has the same appearance, and even the bronze feet and everything. And so what's interesting is that the clothing that the Father is wearing, the Ancient of Days, is exactly what's descriptive of Jesus here. And so they're showing, I think, a harmony between the two of them, that they are of equal status and identity because they're one, right? And so even though he is the Son of Man, he's God himself, right? It's crazy. But anyways, so he's, got this on, and then all of a sudden, behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. So like the real Moses and Elijah, Moses would have risen from the dead, Elijah would have come down from heaven, and boom, you got a party, right? And so they're talking with Jesus. No idea what they're talking about, but I'm sure it's amazing. But Moses represents the law, right? He's the one who wrote the first 5 books of the Torah, which it's called the Torah, but it means the law. That's how we would translate it, or instruction of God. And Elijah is one of the foremost prophets in Israel's history. Really huge, impactful ministry, and steward of Elijah and everything. And so Elisha, sorry. But anyway, so he is representation of all the prophets. So you got the law and the prophets talking to Jesus, who is the fulfillment of all of it, right? And Peter says to Jesus, Lord, if it's good that we are here. Period. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. And so then Peter is basically saying, like, Lord, we should memorialize this moment. We should capture it, like basically take a snapshot of it and build a monument to this glorious day, because your kingdom's coming. And like, you just said that, right? Like 6 days ago, I remember you saying that your kingdom's coming. So like, let's remember this moment and build a statue in your honor, basically. And we're going to see here in a second, God's like, nope, bad idea. Not yet. And so, but what's interesting is that he says 3 tents. That's the same word as it's tabernacle, essentially. Skene is the Greek word, right? But this is, if we've been reading in our other gospels, remember that John said that the word dwelt among us, right? He became flesh and dwelt, literally skened among us. It's the verb form of this word tent. And so Jesus is the tent, the tabernacle of God already, become man. And so he doesn't need a tent or 3 tents to signify his presence. He is the tent, right? He is the glory of God revealed. And so we don't need that. And so as we keep going, Peter is still speaking, going on about all the great things that he's going to build for Jesus. And behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Right? And so this reminds me of a lot of things, but Exodus 24, 15 and 16, right? It says that that Moses, went up on the mountain and was receiving instruction from the Lord on how to lead his people. And it says, Moses went up on the mountain and the cloud covered the mountain, right? So then verse 16, the glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And then on the 7th day, he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. I just now noticed that there's 6 days of waiting, and then on the 7th day he spoke. And just in the same way, there were 6 days of waiting, and then Jesus comes onto the mountain and God speaks. And so interesting parallel there. I'm not sure if there's significance to that, but there's so many layers of depth of meaning. It's so beautiful in the Bible. None of us will ever be able to dig the depths of it completely, but we can try. And so that's what we're doing today, right? And so God says, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And so this is alluding to Genesis 22, when Isaac is taken up by Abraham on the mountain, and it says that his beloved son, take your beloved son. God commands him to be a sacrifice, right? And we ultimately know that he doesn't get sacrificed. It was a test to see if Abraham was going to be faithful, which God knew he's going to be faithful, but Abraham needed to see that his faithfulness was sure. And then to receive his son back from the grave is an even greater blessing now, knowing that it's precious. But anyways, with whom I'm well pleased, that alludes to Psalm 2, that look at my son, with whom I'm well pleased, that he will, I will give him the inheritance of the nations, right? So I'm going to, give him all the kingdoms of the earth as his inheritance, right? And so this is Jesus. This is who he's talking about here. And so God is like, listen to him, right? This is my son, my beloved son. just like Abraham and Isaac, this is my beloved son, and I am well pleased in him. He is going to be the inheritor of the entire planet and all of the kingdoms of the world and the universe. And so listen to him, focus on him, not your own ideas. Look at him. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified, right? And that reminds me of Ezekiel 128, where we see that, if I pull it up here, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud of the day of rain, on the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness all around, right? Such was the appearance of the brightness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face and I heard the voice of one speaking, right? And so Ezekiel, he sees this glory and he's just like, whoa, I can't do anything but fall, right? And many people throughout the Bible do that. But then what's interesting is that Jesus came and touched them, saying, rise, have no fear. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus, right? And so he touched him, right? That reminds me of, there's three times this happens to Daniel 8:18, 10:10, and 10:18, where these angels actually come and show him stuff, and he like just passes out basically, and the angels have to touch him and give him strength to stand back up even though he's still trembling, right? And so Jesus, even more reason to tremble in the face of his true glory, says, rise, have no fear, right? And so this reminds me of Ezekiel 20, where Moses is on the mountain and he comes down and there's thunder and lightning and all the people are scared. It says, now when the people saw thunder and the lightning, the flashing of lightning, sound of the trumpets, and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled. Makes sense. They stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. Right? And so Jesus here is saying, I see that you're terrified. Rise, have no fear. Right? And so he knows who, God the Father is. He's his son. And he is God. And so he knows that there's no reason to be terrified, but there is reason to have true fear of the Lord, right? And they're two very slightly different words in Hebrew. And so it's kind of a similar play on words here that Jesus is alluding to from the Old Testament, where they're saying, don't be afraid of God, have fear of God, which leads to reverence. It's don't be repulsed away from God in fear, but be attracted to him in holy reverence and awe, right? And so you should be afraid of being without God, not afraid of being near God. And that's what Jesus is again reminding them of and pulling them back into. And just the tenderness, the softness of Jesus, even in the midst of such great glory, that even, as he's revealing himself as King of the universe here, he still touches them. The fact that they can still be touched by this man is crazy, because he's not just a man, he's God himself. And the fact that he looks them in the eyes and says, come here. I want you, right? I want you to be with me. I want you to see this. And I want you to know that I'm real and that I have a plan, and it's not like your plans, right? It's not, it says in Isaiah 55, that the plans of the Lord are higher than ours. His thoughts are greater, right? And so Jesus's are so much bigger than ours, but he's still here. He's still human. He can still touch us, right? And so I just love just seeing all of this beauty, all of just the splendor of this. I just really fun to go in depth with this tonight. And I read that this morning, and the Lord's like, just hold off and come back later to it. But man, it's just so amazing to see what an incredible, transcendent and yet immanent God that we serve. And in his presence, as we saw tonight, are holy saints.